All right. Good morning, everybody. So my name is Richard McHale. I'm a member of the executive committee of MWMA. I'm a past president, and I humbly serve as the director for Austin Resource Recovery. Thank you. So yesterday during the Urban Summit, there was a lot of talk from folks about the Swiffer grants, and I really felt a total lack of empathy for those of us that actually received one. So, they don't really understand the issues that we have when we get this money. Walk a little bit in our shoes. This money, I go into my office, I have to move that money around. The stress, the anxiety that is created from that money. So, it's a hard thing. It's difficult, but I'm sorry. This is not the therapy session for those that did get the grant. I'm sorry. My bad. So we are here to talk with Connor Riffle, who is the senior vice president with Smart Cities with Rubicon, to talk a little bit about technology and integration and issues that we all face. I know that City of Austin, we've faced a lot of issues with moving to a digital transition, moving to a digital format. And I just have some questions for you, Connor. I think one of the big questions is, what can cities do when they do make that transition from paper to a digital format?
Sure. Well, it's a good question. And to set the stage, I think every single city in America is going to make this transition, whether you've already made it or whether you haven't made it, you're still using paper to run your day-to-day operations, paper route sheets, printing out sheets for your dispatchers. All of that is going away in the next 5 years. And in the next 5 years, I think every single city in America will have made this transition. So it's a very timely topic, and it's not easy. The change management of moving from kind of the way that you've done things for 30, 40, 100 years to the kind of the new digital way of doing things is a tough transition. So there's a number of best practices that I think are important to keep in mind as you make that transition. Now, we've helped more than 100 cities across the U.S. and Canada do this over the last 6 years to make that transition. And so I've seen it up close. I've seen what works. I've seen what doesn't. And I can I give you a little bit of insight into kind of some of the things that work in making that transition. I think first thing is, don't underestimate it. I think a lot of folks say like, oh, it'll be easy. We'll just bring in some tech and everybody will start using tech and that'll be it. It's not that easy. Make sure that you resource it correctly. Make sure you have a staff member who's in charge, who owns that transition. Make sure you have buy-in from your supervisors. And make sure that everybody on the team is clear what the expectations are about moving forward. So, for example, one of the things that we do is put tablets in the vehicles, right? So that drivers have digital route sheets, they have turn-by-turn directions, they know exactly who to pick up, how to get there, how to follow the route, and then they have the ability to log issues if they encounter them on the route. And often what this is replacing is a sheaf of paper route sheets that they get every day, which they're marking on with pencil or pen and then turning back into the dispatchers. So if you're making that transition, a really, really key thing is to make sure that the drivers are bought in. And one of the ways that we do that, and we've seen successful cities, many of whom are in this room, who've made that transition, get that driver buy-in, is by helping the drivers understand that this is for them. We made the technology for them. In our case, we literally built the technology from the driver's perspective because we knew that they were one of the most important constituencies. So making sure your drivers understand that this is for them. Most of your drivers are folks that are doing the right thing. They're out there every day. They know the routes. They know who to pick up. And if you can have their back, if you can say we're giving you this technology so that we can prove that you're doing your job correctly, and we can get your back when Mrs. McGillicuddy at 123 Main Street calls in and says you missed her bin. We know that you were there because you have this tablet in your truck and you marked that there was the bin wasn't out or the bin was contaminated, so you didn't pick it up. So making sure you don't underestimate it, making sure your team is on board, and especially your drivers are on board, two really important best practices for making that transition from paper to digital.
Yeah, I know that was a big consideration that we had in Austin, and it's always good. You always want to have that buy-in from staff, and you want to get out there in front and kind of do that. But we had a system, and for full disclosure, we have Rubicon, and it's good to hear when you have two drivers talking and they don't know the director's listening, and they like, man, I like this because there's a feature called route share where they can jump on their neighbor's route like their buddy and kind of help finish that route. And that's not even something we pushed. That's something that they discovered among themselves, and that they figured that they can use that to their benefit to get those routes done. So I think that's real important. A lot of times when I talk to companies that do this type of thing, they talk about implementing a full operating suite or fleet optimization, but it seems like there's a difference in those terms. Can you elaborate a little bit on what they might be talking about?
So I think the transition that folks are going to make is to that full digital operational suite, right? So everything that you do in your day-to-day, from managing your customers, who do you pick up, to managing your services, how many times a day do you pick those up, what do you pick up, to managing your dispatching, to managing your route optimization, to managing your billing, all of that can take place in one system now. Right? It used to be maybe you might buy a piece of route optimization software and you had a guy who did route optimization, and he would give you he would print out the paper maps and you give them to the drivers. Again, those days are going away. And now you've got a full kind of operational suite that in our case, we designed specifically for you, specifically for cities that run their own operations to make your life easier, because you all told us at this meeting many years ago and lots of other meetings that that's what you wanted. You wanted to be able to do everything in one system and have everything talk to one another. So that's kind of what the digital operational suite is all about. And part of that is making sure that the routes that you're running on a day-to-day basis are optimized. So, for example, if you run a bulky waste collection operation and you're picking up 50 bulky waste stops a day, that route that your trucks take to get to pick up all those bulky stops, that should be an optimized route. That route should be dictated by technology. You can tweak it, you can make tweaks, you can add your own stuff, but it should be dictated by technology. So that's one piece of what you can get in that operational suite. Fleet optimization is often a kind of a separate component where actually you might take 6 months to actually optimize your entire fleet operations. You might look at what days of the week do you service. You might look at, do I want people's route service days to change? You might look at eliminating U-turns across your entire fleet. You might look at downsizing or upsizing the number of vehicles you have. When we take into account all of those different factors, we call that a fleet optimization. We usually do that kind of offline in consultation with folks to make sure that we incorporate all of the specifics of your operation. What we find is that every operation is different in terms of their goals. Some of y'all want to move from 5 days a week to 4 days a week. Some of you want to move from 4 days a week to 5 days a week. Some of you are willing, and your mayor is willing to say, we're going to allow everybody's day to change. Others are saying, no, the political folks don't want to do that. They don't want to put everybody through that disruption. So in a fleet optimization exercise, we take into account all of those kind of specific things. And as a result, we do that fleet optimization exercise offline. The route optimization, the day-to-day route stuff, all part of the suite. The fleet optimization kind of separate over the course of, say, 6 months or so to implement. And there's many folks in the room who have been through this. I'm sure this isn't new to a lot of people, but it's an important part of getting to that kind of overall optimized fleet.
So you mentioned a little bit about dispatching in there, and obviously this system is of benefit to the drivers out in the field, but are there any benefits to those back in the office, say a dispatch office, or maybe just administrative staff that do accounting or whatever?
Sure, definitely. I mean, I think one of the things we see is a lot of, in operations that run on paper, is a lot of duplicate entry, a lot of paper entry, a lot of, hey, I received this information, now my job is to put it into the computer. The idea with this is we eliminate that, right? So whatever the drivers see in the field automatically goes into the system. So the dispatcher's job now is not to necessarily do data entry. The dispatcher's job is to look at optimization opportunities. Maybe they're now spending the time that they used to be spending entering data. They're spending that time creating optimized routes, or they're spending that time reconciling bills. Just a bunch of different things that you can do once you gain that efficiency through implementing this full service digital suite.
So as we've begun to roll this out, there's a lot of data there, a lot of data. How do we use that data to leverage other efforts to become more efficient or provide better services?
Sure. Well, I think like the framework that we use and I think folks find helpful is really just a cost savings framework, right? It's about making sure that you're looking at the ROI of implementing software. And I find generally, no matter what the political situation is in your particular city, or whether the winds at your back or the winds at your face, generally cost savings wins the day across the board. Solid waste collection is very expensive. As we know, it's the most expensive part of the waste value chain. And the more that we can reduce the cost of waste collection, the more money we have to spend on other things that we might want to do, be that recycling, be that standing up an organics collection program, be that investing in new capital costs like new trucks. So all of those things are enabled, right, through digital technology, but it's really critical to track the cost savings. So one of the things that we do is we actually work with all of our customers to help them track that. We have a team that is focused on tracking cost savings and empowering you all with the data that you need to be able to have that data and to be able to communicate that to your internal stakeholders, make sure that people understand, and then also for you to make sure, like, okay, great, well, we know now that we don't need these people for this, so we can use those people for something else that we've been wanting to work on. In the city of Spokane, for example, just off the top, shifting away from paper to digital, just not printing out paper route sheets anymore, the city of Spokane saved $25,000 a year, just in paper printing costs alone. So we know those costs exist across your organization, and I think the important thing about making this transition is measuring those cost reductions, so that you can talk to those internal stakeholders. You can be like, listen, we're saving money, and we're now able to use those extra resources in a different way.
So this is a shorter session. This is a 30-minute session. So if you do all have questions, please come up to the mic. I do have some other questions that I can ask. But if you have questions, please go ahead and come up there. In terms of working with stakeholders, what are the important considerations to make, and as far as what processes should be prioritized?
So I think we talked about one, which is making sure that you have a staff member or multiple staff members who own the implementation, right? That's really critical. Often in our case, we have a person who it's like, they call them like, oh, you're the Rubicon person, right? And that's usually like a kind of temporary role that exists for a year or two as the implementation happens, and then as people get comfortable with it. So that's a really important role that I recommend folks think about and resource correctly. You have to think about your customers as well. So one thing that we see, for example, is in most cities, and I'm sure this isn't the case in any of yours, but in some of the cities that we see, you have a set of VIP customers who are going to be calling in with missed pickups no matter what, right? And what we see is as soon as drivers start documenting that they were at a particular residence and they start snapping images in a systematic way to show that the bin wasn't out or that the bin was contaminated, we see a number of those calls just fall off, right? As soon as residents start to see that. So communicating with your customers about these changes that are happening is important, and it's a real opportunity as you say, like, hey, like, we're doing things differently now, right? And we're going to be, part of the one thing that technology enables is it enables you not to have to go back in a situation if you have the proof, right? A lot of folks, if you're just using paper, you might not have the proof right now. But with a digital system, you have that proof. And so you can say to customers, we're not coming back. And that will reduce that volume of calls that come into your 311 as folks realize that you're actually documenting things like that. So customer communication is also critical. And then I really would emphasize, and this is a little bit of a kind of pet project of mine, but I really would emphasize your supervisors as being a really, really important constituency. We think it's so important that we built a specific app experience for supervisors. We rode around with a bunch of supervisors in the field, and we created a specific experience for them so they can track their teams, they can understand exactly what's happening from the field in real time using a tablet. And that dedicated experience, I think, has helped us to win over that supervisor group because we made the tech for them. And in cities where you don't have the supervisors bought in, it's going to be very hard for the management to communicate to the drivers and to get that kind of that buy-in. So the supervisor group is a really, really critical one to focus on as you make that transition.
So with implementing a new system like this, obviously there's a lot of training that's required, and I'm not very technology savvy, but the system is very intuitive. But what are some of the most effective ways to do some of that training?
Sure. So I think the key to training, and again, this is a little bit of a pet project of mine, but the key to good training, in my view and in our experience, is it's incumbent upon us as the company to meet your team where they are. And that means that you don't come to us, we come to you. So if we're going to train drivers, we're going to come to the driver break room, and it's going to be 6 a.m. or right before they go out, and we're going to do 3 or 4 days where for 30 minutes right before they go out, we're giving them tips on how to use the tech. We're training them on the tech. We're also going to do ride-alongs, right? With the drivers, we'll do group training, and then we'll do one-on-ones with the drivers. We'll be in the cab with them, walking them through how it works, walking them through the specifics of it, right? Our team is all experienced folks that have been in trucks, folks that have worked in cities and in haulers. They know the industry, they know how to talk to drivers, and we meet them where they are. So that's really critical. Same thing for dispatchers and for office staff. We're at your desk. Right? We can do a group training just to get started, but that group training takes place in your conference room, and then we come to your desk. We're at the desk with them, walking them through it, showing them the little nuances of the system, showing them, instead of clicking here, you can click here, and you can save yourself 6 steps. So that we found works really well. We have a dedicated team. All they do is travel from city to city to do this, and they're very good at it. But I think that this is a real key to making an implementation like this successful, is making sure that training is really good. And we've shown it. I mean, I think in the city of Houston, we were able to launch in about from contract signing to actual implementation, everybody's trained up and running in 73 days. In the city of Atlanta, we were able to do it in 23 days. So this, having a system, having a team that's focused on this and meeting your teams where they are is really key to everybody saying like, yeah, I'm ready to go. I got the training. They met me where I am. I feel confident in it, and let's go. Let's do this.
So we've all heard the old adage, you can't improve what you can't measure. So, with a system like this, obviously municipalities, we have our metrics that we look at to see, how we've improved. And so what are some measures that we should be looking at as far as this system, as to whether it's really coming to fruition like we expect?
Sure. So that's a great question. And there's a couple of important ones that I think we found to be really important, again, through a lot of trial and error and a lot of doing it the wrong way. One is look at your driver logins. So how many of your drivers are logging in on a daily basis? That number should be 90+%. Not just logins, but how many of your drivers are actually logging issues in the field when they see them. So how many are logging if there's a bin that's not out? How many are logging contamination? How many of them are logging if the bin was blocked at a particular place? That is a really critical measure for how engaged your drivers are with the tech. And in some cities, and I don't think Denton, Texas is here, but in Denton, they on this particular metric, they crush. Their drivers are heavily engaged using the tech significantly. Spokane, who I already mentioned, same thing. Drivers are heavily using the tech. That is the sign of a really engaged driver workforce. That is the sign of a team of drivers who are like, this is it. I like this. It's helping me with my job. And so that's a really important one. I think another one is measuring your pickups per hour over time, right? And seeing if you see an improvement in pickups per hour. We track pickups per hour within the system. It's a really good metric to show that efficiency. And with technology, you don't have to rely on anybody. You don't have to do any math. It's all calculated for you right there in the system. And so you can see kind of how that number of pickups per hour is improving over time as your routes get more optimized, as your drivers get more engaged. As those routes improve, you'll see that number increase. So that's a few of the ones that I think show really, really good implementation. I'll mention one other, which is a little bit deeper, but it is related to the actual integrations with your other technology systems across your city. This is a really, really important part of making sure that the technology is widely adopted. Is how many integrations do you have? Our system can exist in a silo in solid waste. It was designed for the solid waste team, so it doesn't need to be integrated with other existing systems, but we do integrate with a number of systems out of the box. So we'll integrate with your telematics solution automatically via Samsara, Geotab, whatever you use. We'll integrate with your GIS system. We integrate with Esri ArcGIS out of the box. We'll integrate with your 311. We've built a really simple way to speed up integrations with 311 to make sure that those calls that come into 311, those work orders can come across into our system and then go back. So in thinking about, and this is a little bit more long-term metric, but in thinking about, hey, how successful is this implementation? How many integrations, how many live integrations do we have between our digital operating system and other systems in the city shows that the system is not being adopted just by you, but is also being adopted by the whole city.
So Susan and her team at Waste Management talked a little bit about technology at the last session and how it's evolving, and what do you see as on the horizon for this type of technology, or even some of those other add-on integrated technologies to help us improve our operations?
Sure. So I think I get really excited when I think about this future. Now that we're making this digital transition, and now that folks are moving away from paper and onto kind of modern cloud-native digital solutions, now we have the baseline in place to do a lot of really interesting stuff where we will see really significant gains. A great example is being able to do more with cameras. So in the city of Kansas City and a number of cities across the U.S., we've actually enabled these garbage trucks with cameras, and that enables them to look for other things automatically while the drivers are going about their day-to-day doing garbage and recycling pickup. So we have front-facing cameras that look out and look for potholes automatically, scan the road. We process all the images on the device itself, and then we only send up images where we find a pothole, and those appear in your portal, so you can see like, hey, this is where we basically build a heat map of where all your potholes are across the city. So this is really great, and we could never get to this place until we really nailed the kind of day-to-day of solid waste collection. But as we do that, and as we implement successfully, and as we have more and more cities, we can start to do this kind of extra thing. And this gives you a really interesting opportunity, which is your garbage trucks can be not just assets to pick up the trash, but also assets for the rest of the city to detect things like potholes. We've also pioneered some really interesting technology to detect contamination in the hopper using cameras and computer vision. So in the city of San Antonio, we actually had a camera in the hopper, and every time the recycling was tipped, we would actually scan for contamination to make sure that there was nothing bad in that stream. And what that allows us to do is identify routes and neighborhoods where contamination rates are higher, and that allows you to target those neighborhoods or those routes with your recycling education information. And that's really important because it means you can be very targeted about where you're going after contamination, as opposed to spraying it across the whole city, which can be very expensive. So those are two examples using computer vision and AI about kind of where I think the industry is going to go in the future. That'll be really exciting and really interesting, and enable us to do some really, really awesome things that kind of spread beyond this room.
You just got my mind going here of all these revenue revenues from other city departments doing their work for them as I just drive my trucks down the road. So
that's right.
I'm liking this. So.
That's right. Well, and I think like one thing I've seen just in all the years I've been doing this is often solid waste exists. It can exist a little bit in a silo. And I love the idea of us being able to increase these interdependencies between these different departments using technology, because that way the city can kind of operate as one, and we can start to enable the solid waste team can start to enable efficiency across the whole city, not just in the solid waste department.
So, do you apply this application to other things other than solid waste? So, like say street sweeping or other municipal operations?
Sure, we do. We do street sweeping as well. So if anybody is interested in street sweeping, we have similar technology for street sweeping, same idea. And we do our confirmation of service for street sweeping on a street segment basis. In solid waste, we do it on an address basis, but in street sweeping, we do it on a segment basis. And we also have a number of customers using our platform for snow removal as well, which is again a kind of an adjacent area. So you can imagine kind of the efficiencies. For example, to go back to our example in Kansas City. Kansas City has about 300 snow removal vehicles using our tech. They have about 100 solid waste vehicles using our tech, but they don't necessarily need to have that many licenses from us because some of the garbage trucks help on snow, and so they can actually share across these different departments, and that creates some really interesting efficiencies of scale. Snow is a great example where it's like it may spike during a snowstorm. You may need every truck on the road, and your technology needs to be able to flex with you in that area, and so that efficiency across departments, again, is kind of a hallmark of how we think about this space, and solid waste is really the core of it.
Great, Connor. That's great. That concludes my questions. Do we have any questions from the audience?
You sort of answered it just now. My city is out for an RFP for routeware, and it's very siloed. They don't want to use the garbage routeware for actually, we're looking at snow plowing. How easy is it for managers of an age like me to say, yes, I can use the same technology for a garbage system and put it into snow plowing, and then on a salting route, which is a brine route, which is different than our plow routes, and a street sweeping route. I love the pothole idea. That's going to be sweet.
Well, so the answer is you can do all that, right? You just need to make sure that you spec out that requirement in your RFP, right? You need to make sure that you ask for the market for software that can meet all those criteria, and it's not there's not a huge amount of companies out there that can do it. And I always say, like, we started with solid waste in a way because it's the hardest. But snow is also really hard. Street sweeping is also really hard. They're just kind of hard in different ways. So it's definitely doable. And our approach is a software-first approach. So whatever we can do with an iPhone, we will do. Whatever we can do with software, we will do. So a lot of folks, for example, service confirmation, confirming service at individual addresses. RFID is a way to do that. That is generally a hardware-based approach. You need a chip, a physical chip, and you need a physical reader. We've actually built a way to do service confirmation for garbage without having to do RFID. So that's one example of kind of our software-first approach. The reason I'm mentioning that is because that software-first approach enables you to share across different departments, right? Because all you need is an iPad, and you just need to download our app, and that way anybody who has a city iPad can download our app and get going on, for example, a snow route if you need all hands on deck on snow, right? And some cities will pause garbage collection when there's a big snowstorm. That's a perfect example where it's like you don't need to have a bunch of hardware installed on your snow fleet in order to be up and running. People just need an app, and then they can get turn-by-turn directions, and they're ready to go. So this is kind of a insight into the future and where the world is going is more and more folks will be that software first approach because it enables so much more efficiency and cost savings for municipalities down the road. Yes, Android as well. Yes, sorry, I'm an iPhone guy, but we do Android as well. We love Android. Yeah. Thank you, Harry.
All right. Any other questions? Connor, I have one last question then. Are y'all on any cooperative buy boards or anything like that where people can just go straight to it? And
Sure, we are. Yep, we're on Sourcewell, which is fantastic. We're also on HGAC Buy, and you can also procure us through the AWS Marketplace using the Omnia contract. So lots of different options for folks to buy. We love buy boards, and it makes it much easier. I hear a lot about procurement departments. I hear a lot about IT departments, and I would say, make those teams your best friends if possible, because when we see cities that are working in concert with their procurement teams and their IT teams, procurement of software like ours goes a lot faster, especially if you can have a buy board involved. It's not all doom and gloom if you're working closely with procurement or IT. We have seen it work really successfully, and a buy board can be really critical to that. Procurement teams usually like the buy boards. IT usually likes the buy boards. They're usually familiar with it, and so it can kind of make all three folks happy, and we can move these projects forward a lot faster.
Thanks. Save me a few steps. How close do you think we are to being able to kind of take that information, that you have right now with Rubicon and be able to use that as a customer service tool, somewhat of a viewer model that residents can maybe log into and say, oh, okay, I thought I missed them, but they're just a couple of blocks over. Real-time information.
Sure. We can do it now. If folks want to enable residents to view what's happening in the solid waste department or in the snow department, street sweeping, we can do that. It's fairly easy for us to turn on, so you can get that resident engagement. And I think you're going to see more and more of that going forward, right? I think we're gonna as residents get more experience with digital technology, they get more used to using apps, and they get more used to interfacing with their city in technology means, right, as opposed to on the phone. I think there's massive opportunities, because if you've got somebody engaged, for example, in looking at where the garbage truck is, it is going to be a lot easier to get them a message that pops up when they look at that to say, hey, make sure you don't have any contamination in your recycling, right? So this, and remember, that interaction effectively is like more or less free for you, right? Because all you have to do is show them that message on when they look at it. So there's a lot of efficiencies of scale I think we can get when we use software and that software first approach to engage our residents, and I'm actually really excited about that that future going forward.
so that concludes our presentation. If everyone could give a round of applause to Connor. And we got about probably 5-10 minutes before our next session on capture rates and measurement. So if you want to use that time to get your bingo card signed out in the hallway with the vendors for the drawing later on, that would be great. So thank y'all.